Pay attention to the woman behind the counter. This is 27-year-old Rhiannon Whyte, a waitress at this hotel. She doesn't know it yet, but someone in this bar is watching her closely. Hours later, Rhiannon's shift ends. She walks alone toward the railway station to catch a train back home. Seconds later, a man in a gray hoodie is seen walking the same path, his pace quickening as he tries to catch up to her. Unfortunately, Rhiannon would never get to board that train. Back at the hotel parking lot, the man in the hoodie is seen happy and dancing with friends. It seems ordinary, but in the background, paramedics have just arrived at the station where Rhiannon was last seen, responding to reports of a woman found with catastrophic injuries. It wasn't looking good. The man is then seen dancing his way back to his hotel room, appearing completely untroubled. This celebration and these pieces of footage have just become the central pieces of a murder investigation. In 2024, in the UK, the Park Inn by Radisson in Bescot, Walsall was not a typical hotel. It was a facility block booked by the Home Office to house male asylum seekers. This is where 27-year-old Rhiannon Whyte worked. She had been at the job for about 3 months, taking the position because she wanted to support people and believed it was a safe environment. She was a mother to a 5-year-old son, and this work was part of the life she was building for him. But the reality of the hotel was complex. While Rhiannon saw her role as one of support, the facility itself was chaotic. Police had been called multiple times for disturbances, residents had made threats to staff, and staff had reportedly found weapons, including knives and axes, in the rooms. This was the environment where Rhiannon Whyte worked her late shifts, and it was also the place where her killer, Deng Chol Majek, lived. He was a Sudanese national who had arrived in the UK in July 2024, claiming asylum. His identity was a point of confusion for authorities. Majek insisted he was 19 years old, but his documents proved otherwise, listing his age as 27. He was a man who claimed he had fled Sudan, leaving a pregnant wife and child behind. But at the hotel, his behavior had already raised alarms. He was not just another resident. Before the night of the murder, Majek had been formally reported to hotel security. Staff members, including Rhiannon, had noted his disturbing behavior. He was known for staring at female colleagues for extended periods. Rhiannon herself had expressed discomfort about Majek. Despite these reports, no formal action was taken to remove him or protect the staff. Majek continued to live in the hotel, observing the daily routines. He knew when Rhiannon worked, and he knew when she left. On the evening of October 20th, 2024, Rhiannon Whyte was working her late shift. Majek was sitting in the hotel foyer, staring at her for extended periods while she worked. This was the same behavior that had been reported to security before. Later in the shift, Rhiannon and other staff members took a break. As expected, Majek followed them. On their way back, he intentionally brushed against Rhiannon's shoulder. She was visibly confused by the contact, but carried on with her work. Majek returned to his seat and continued to watch her. For hours, he observed her interactions, her movements, her routines. He waited as the hotel quieted down. At 11 p.m., Rhiannon's shift ended. She gathered her belongings and left the hotel, unaware that the man who had been staring at her all night was preparing to follow. At 11:10 p.m., Rhiannon Whyte left the Park Inn. She was captured walking alone across the car park and toward the footbridge to the Bescot Stadium railway station, while on the phone with a friend. Minutes later, Majek was seen following her, speeding up his pace to catch up. They reached the platform, an area in a complete CCTV blind spot. This is where Majek attacked her. The assault was immediate and brutal. Using a screwdriver, he stabbed her 23 times in the head. The only witness was the friend on the phone, who later reported hearing Rhiannon let out a high-pitched scream before the line went dead. Majek fled the scene immediately. He ran from the platform, taking Rhiannon's phone and throwing it into a nearby river. He then casually walked to a local shop to buy beer before heading back to the hotel. At 11:19 p.m., just minutes after Majek fled, a train pulled into the Bescot Stadium station. The driver and guard were the first to find Rhiannon. She was collapsed on the platform, critically injured and bleeding. They rendered first aid and summoned emergency help. Meanwhile, Majek was with a small group outside the hotel, cheering and dancing with other residents. In the background of the phone footage, medics were fighting to save Rhiannon's life. At 11:55 p.m., he was seen on the first-floor corridor, still dancing as he returned to his room.
While Majek settled in for the night, Rhiannon Whyte was being rushed to Birmingham's Queen Elizabeth Hospital. She was conscious but had sustained catastrophic brain injuries and was fighting to stay alive. Rhiannon Whyte fought for her life for 3 days. But on October 23, 2024, she died from her injuries, surrounded by her family. What began as a critical assault investigation was now a homicide. Detectives from the British Transport Police led the case. They had the location of the attack, but the platform's blind spot meant they had no direct footage of the murder. The investigation turned to tracing the victims and the killer's movements. Officers pulled all available footage from the hotel, the station, and the surrounding area. They established a clear timeline. They saw Rhiannon leave the Park Inn. They saw Majek follow her minutes later. They saw that same man return to the hotel dancing. Hotel staff were shown the footage and immediately recognized Majek. Police moved to his room to arrest him. The forensic evidence was overwhelming and immediate. In the room, officers seized the jacket and sandals Majek was seen wearing in the footage. Both items were stained with Rhiannon Whyte's blood. Majek was charged with murder and possession of a weapon.
On October 13, 2025, the trial of Deng Chol Majek began at Wolverhampton Crown Court. Majek pleaded not guilty, denying both the murder charge and the possession of a weapon. His defense was simple. He claimed he was elsewhere in the hotel at the time of the attack and had no motive to harm Rhiannon Whyte. The Crown Prosecution Service presented its case, building a timeline of indisputable facts for the jury. On October 24, 2025, after 3 hours of deliberation, the jury at Wolverhampton Crown Court returned its verdict. They found Deng Chol Majek guilty of the murder of Rhiannon Whyte and of possession of a weapon. Majek, who had shown no remorse according to investigators, was remanded in custody. The judge ordered a pre-sentence report and a formal age assessment to resolve the significant discrepancy over Majek's true age, which would be a factor in his sentencing. The verdict brought a form of justice, but it also amplified the trauma for Rhiannon's family. The British Transport Police called it a brutal, cowardly, and entirely unprovoked attack. The case became a flashpoint in the national debate over the UK's asylum system. The Home Office immediately reiterated its plans to close every asylum hotel, using the Walsall murder as evidence of a failed policy. In the wake of the trial, the Park Inn by Radisson in Walsall was cleared out of asylum seekers. As of late 2025, Deng Chol Majek remains in custody awaiting his sentencing, scheduled for December 15th. The murder of Rhiannon Whyte left a permanent void in her family and community. Her 5-year-old son was left without a mother. In victim statements, her family described the trauma of having to explain her death to her child. Despite their grief, they were specific. They did not want Rhiannon's death to be used to demonize all asylum seekers, only to bring to justice the one man responsible. In the public and media, the case had an immediate and polarizing effect. It became a focal point for the intense, ongoing national debate about immigration and the UK's asylum system. For some politicians and commentators, the murder was definitive proof of a failed system. They pointed to the case as evidence of the dangers of housing asylum seekers in unsecured hotels. The government, in its official response, condemned the crime and stated it underscored the need for its reforms, which included closing all asylum hotels. For other politicians and opposition groups, the tragedy was not one of bad individuals, but of a broken, overwhelmed asylum system. They argued that placing vulnerable people in chaotic, understaffed facilities like the Park Inn created a volatile environment where such a tragedy was inevitable. The case of Rhiannon Whyte did not create this political division, but it became a brutal, human example used by all sides to demand action. The most direct policy consequence was the government's immediate acceleration of its plan to close every asylum hotel. The Park Inn in Walsall was one of the first to be cleared out. The case remains a symbol of a system's failure. It left a family broken and forced a national reckoning over the policy that placed a kind, unsuspecting 27-year-old mother in the same building as the man who would stalk and kill her.